Hi, this is Ron from POCculture.com. Great to speak with all of you for this exciting project. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Fine,
Thanks for
thanks.
Nice to
having
see
us.
you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's my pleasure. I think these types of interviews are absolutely one of my favorite things to do because it's one of those things where it's so much fun, but of course the project has extra impact, weight, and importance. So very excited to chat with you all about it. And Norman, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. Every good comic story has an origin story. So if you could tell us a little bit about this project's origin story, like how did it come about? What's the genesis of it?
So I have to do this in partnership with my old friend, Amy Chu. The story is that a long time ago when we were in college together, uh, we were friends in Boston. Amy earned 3 degrees and we met again years later. Back then, Amy was a co-founder of A Magazine. And years later, I asked her what she's doing, and she says, now I'm writing graphic novels as my full-time gig, even though I have an HBS degree. And so we started talking and about, the Asian American community. And I asked her, hey, is there a graphic novel about AAPI history that's for kids? And Amy, what did you say?
Yeah, well, I mean, we did it. There were small things that were happening, but nothing in the scope that you wanted. So
Yeah. And she said, oh, it takes 6 months and we could
I
get it
think
done
I
right
actually said
away.
it takes a month. If you really need to get it done, we'll get it done.
Yeah, so it's taking a little longer than that, but it's just a void in the world out there. And with Amy's expertise in this area and our passion to tell AAPI stories, it just was a natural fit.
That's amazing. And yeah, Amy, with your multiple degrees, your multiple professions and successes, you're certainly putting all of us to shame. But how
Oh,
exciting was it for you to finally be able to do a project like this?
it's funny. I think when Stephanie was there when we did our summit, in Cambridge at Harvard, it is a little bit of destiny, right? I mean, all these things led up to this moment where I got the call from Norman and we're talking, and it's just like everything sort of clicked, right? Everything I've done up to this moment, it was like a, you know, everything everywhere all at once kind of thing, right? That I had done a magazine, that I had some Asian American activist background. I worked on getting Asian American studies at Wellesley College. And then I put in my dues learning how to write comics. So all of that it wasn't intended to happen this way, but it all came together in a really amazing way.
I love that. There's so much that you could delve into about that. It's like we do all of these things as part of our just regular lives or careers, and then you stop and realize like how much you can pull from to do a project like this, and that's really exciting. So Stephanie, Amy mentioned you were in the room when these conversations were starting. And so how did Third State Books, which I love, your mission and your goals, how did you get involved?
So actually that the room she's talking about was specifically a summit where the session I believe was non-linear career paths. And then Amy was talking about her non-linear career path, and a lot of it resonated with me in that so much of what I did before felt very aimless, but it's all coming into play now with this project. So we actually were put in touch with TAAF after this book was already produced, and we were bringing in more like the distribution, but the origin story of Third State starts far before we got in touch with TAAF. So we were put in touch, me and Charles were put in touch at the end of 2021 as and it just started with like casual conversations, just ideating. And in Silicon Valley, we call it like founder dating, where you kind of, you have somebody you don't know very well, and you're getting to know like vision, mission, like what's really making the other person tick, how are we going to work together, even questions like is this a nonprofit or not? And we actually decided to incorporate as a public benefit corporation because we felt it was very important to prove out the financial feasibility of Asian American stories and not have this be like charity or like, basically like not nonprofit. We felt it was very important to have that piece in place, but also we are obviously held to a mission, and it's not just about the bottom line. And then in
Yeah.
my personal case, I had started my career as like an intern at Penguin Putnam in children's book, at Dutton Children's Books, and just like reading manuscripts from the slush pile, fetching coffee, that sort of thing. And I talk about how like the reason I didn't actually go full-time into publishing when I graduated is indicative of why Third State needs to exist, which is, the people who can afford to enter as an editorial assistant making $26,000 a year. And I'm from Southern California, so I had absolutely no family, no network in New York City, which is where I would have had to go. And so the people who can afford to do so are oftentimes have like a robust kind of framework and trust funds, or like there's this like legacy of like intergenerational like involvement in the media and art space, and those are the people who end up controlling it. So that's how you end up with an industry that's 85 to 95% white.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're trying to change now. But it took
There was
20
no
years.
fighting to belong, right? When you started as an intern, no fighting to belong graphic novel.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I love that. And I appreciate your comment about wanting to make it clear that our stories, Asian American stories, are financially viable. So I think that is a very important focus to message to everybody to hear that it's not just checking the diversity box, as many people often say. So Charles, Stephanie just talked about how Third State came along after kind of this project was already off the ground. It seems like the perfect fit for your mission and the Asian American Foundation. Could you talk a little bit about how the two came together between your organization and TAAF?
Yeah, when we first met with Norman and told him about Third State and what our mission was and how narrative change is one of the pillars of our mission. And it really aligned with what Norman is trying to do with TAAF as an organization and for the Asian American community. And he told us about this wonderful graphic novel that existed that they had produced. They had not really known how to properly distribute it to the book trade, and that's Stephanie's story and TAAF's story with this book are indicative of how opaque the publishing industry really is. Third State is the first and only general interest publisher that focuses exclusively on Asian American writers and stories, and that's in an industry that is $26 billion a year, just in the US annually. So to have 0 publishers that are focused on telling our stories in authentic and genuine ways, that is the reason why there are no graphic novels that exist like this. That is the reason why TAAF may have not had an easy and clear-cut path to distribution for the book, and why people like Stephanie and I felt compelled to start Third State Books. And so it's just been an incredible experience working with TAAF. The Asian American Foundation is they are champions for our community, and it's been an honor to work with them. And our distribution network is such that we're distributed by Ingram, which is the largest distributor, independent distributor in the entire world. And so now our book is available for more than 45,000 accounts to buy, and that's libraries, bookstores, online retailers, the huge box retailers like Amazon and Walmart and Target, but also all of the smallest independent bookstores across the country and across Canada. And so it's just a wonderful partnership for us to be able to work together, work with the Asian American Education Project, which helped us include a curriculum guide in the back of the book to make sure that these incredible resources by Amy and her son Alex and the great illustrator Louis Chen can get out to as broad an audience as possible.
Yeah, Ron, if I could just add a little bit more on the origin story. So after Amy and I started talking about this, we're very fortunate to work with the Asian American Education Project in Los Angeles, Stuart and Pat Kuo and their incredible team there. They helped us to really make sure that the historical facts were accurate and help us craft the story. And we continue to work with them today. And then the organization actually that started this project was a predecessor to TAAF. It's called Launch. It's a small group of friends that we created Launch together. So I just want to make sure that we acknowledge all the help they provided to us and the history there. That is the true origin story.
It takes a
Yeah.
village, you know?
I was literally going to say that. It takes a village to create something like this. Norman, this conversation started with you asking Amy that question. Hey, does a book like this exist? So what was the seed of that? What prompted you to even ask that question?
I think we are now at this transformative stage for the AAPI community where we're doing so many firsts, right? And we're forming new organizations. We have the first AAPI publishing house, the first graphic novel. We've been, invisible or sidelined for so long, and there is this sense of empowerment that is growing in our community for greater representation, greater resources, greater fight for racial equity. And so we're really excited to be part of that community, to help play a role in that. And thanks to, again, our founders and our supporters, we now have a platform, which is TAAF, that's really focused on trying to create a better future for our community, working in anti-hate, working in education, narrative change, and also in resources and representation. So that's kind of the energy behind it. It's just saying, hey, we've all grown up in the States. We've all been through the situation where people ask you, where are you from and how come you can speak English, to the point now where we have great stories, great leaders, and that we really want to showcase them.
Yeah, all that, and we need it. I mean, like you said, we're in an important time, and I think all of our collective voices are rising.
Yes.
So I really appreciate all of your work, everyone on this panel. And so, Amy, the great thing and the bad thing sometimes about something like this is what we call rep sweats, right? Representation sweats. There's like a lot of pressure that comes with a project like this on your shoulders. How did you feel about, taking this on? Like, it's of course, an exciting project. Like you said, the culmination of what you've done in your career, but there has to be a lot of pressure too to get this right.
It is a lot of pressure, because it's not just making up superhero stuff. That has its own pressure. I believe me, because it's same thing. I'm an Asian female in the business. There's, there are some now, but I started over 10 years ago where it was, women even in the business is still something noteworthy. And so there's always been pressure. Actually, every time I write something, there's pressure, right? Because you do a bad job, they're like, oh, women can't write, or whatever it is. So yeah, there's still pressure because working on volume 2, and that's harder than volume 1, actually. So I have the rep sweats here. It is very difficult. It's not just that, really. Ultimately, it's not. It is, can we do it? Can we do it in such a way, not just being truthful, but actually something a kid is going to want to read? That's really hard. And so I feel that, and it is very stressful, because if we do it and we do it well, it's groundbreaking. This is the wonderful thing about, well, everyone here in this room, right, is that there's a little bit of out of the box thinking that we're trying to employ here, that we want results. And the wonderful thing about graphic novels, and it's been shown statistically, that is a very effective communicator. It's a great way to learn. And almost always it's the adult that picks it up and says, oh my gosh, I learned so much from this book. So how wonderful is that, right? And it gets to, again, what I love about TAAF and Norman's approach and everything. It is very results based, right? We're looking at what are tactical ways that we can change how we are viewed in this country, not just us, but also the intersectionality of how we work with other people of color. This is so important and so poorly addressed, in the past. So I'm really hoping that people understand that and how much work went into it.
Yeah, I think it shows in the book, and I really appreciate, so many points you made. The importance of graphic novels in education, I think, is totally, absolutely true. But I want to touch on the other point you made about kind of other communities of color and that solidarity, because I feel like this story is intentionally inclusive. A lot of these Asian American stories, it's only Asian characters and only Asian voices. But here, I really enjoyed, there's like a Latin character, there's the tour guide Kenji is his mom's from Haiti, and so I thought that was incredible. How'd you come up with the characters and just the overall kind of story arc of this book?
So, as with everything, in fact, I was just teaching online yesterday, and I think people don't understand. A lot of storytelling is also strategy and thinking that through. Like, I don't want to make it sound so clinical, right? But every single character is intentional. All of it is designed, hopefully, to be engaging, but also super inclusive, but not in a right, not in a perfunctory way, right? We're trying to make a very true. Well, this is the thing. It's true. We are a very diverse society that has not been reflected in most mainstream culture. So I guess what we're trying to do is bring back authenticity to that, right? So in a lot of our communities, people of color are the majority, but that's not reflected in mainstream culture. So there's that, but also thinking, where is this book going to go? Who's going to read it? Who needs to read this book? And who needs to feel like they're part of the book? So to me, it's a no-brainer. We make it as inclusive as possible and as engaging as possible. Make sure every single character has agency.
I love all of that. And Stephanie, I want to come to you because I heard you in an interview and you had such a great line. You talked about how our generation is kind of working through a lot of the trauma that we've been through over the years and
Yes.
kind of projecting that into forward into the stories of the kids. And you had this great line of, we want to free them to be heroes of their own stories. And so for this, like, it's that balance, right? It's historical, and I mean, there's a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
But how does this story try to find this balance between like telling that history, but also allowing, like Amy said, the characters to have agency and be heroes?
I think it's really in what the kids do with this information, right? Or how they respond to it and how it changes their understanding of, I mean, you don't really like, I really truly believe like you don't really know who you are unless you know where you came from or you know something about the generations that came before you. Right now it looks like we're fighting a lot of fights on the social justice front, but all that was paved by the activists that came before us, for instance. So I guess that's where I feel like there's that interplay between like, there is that scene where the kid like is seeing some injustice and really like gets worked up and wants to do something about it. And like somebody has to hold him back and be like, you can't interact. But it's like, where does that energy go? It has to go somewhere. And
Absolutely.
I'm hoping we kind of see that play out in the next, I mean, it's funny. I have not seen anything of the script for volumes 2 and 3, but I mean, I'm hoping that they'll do something about it or like, channel this energy, this like these learnings somewhere productive.
Yeah,
Well,
that
that's
moment.
the
Amy,
Sorry?
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. What'd you say, Amy?
that's the hard part, having a good ending.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah,
Amy,
gotta
to her
stick the landing.
credit, from the very beginning, has said we can tell the history that will interest some people, but I want to have a story within the story, a la Magic School Bus, and so that and there's a cliffhanger at the end of the first novel, which is again her creation. So there is the facts and the illustration and just the vibrancy of all that, but then there's the story within the story, which I think will really captivate kids, especially.
It's very hard to get emotion into stories, especially if it's history, right? So that's the real challenge to get that going. And so for the second and the third volume, we're going to build up to that. So the first one we were talking about Sammy getting worked up, but now we got to get the other kids also worked up and in a positive way, right? There's a lot of things to be somewhat depressed about in our, current affairs in history, but we need to look at the positivity of that once we have this information, once we and our children have this information, we can use this for positive change. So that's where it's headed. That's the teaser. So Stephanie, that's where it's going.
The
Love it.
landfills are filled with children's books that are informative and have lots of facts in them that parents and teachers and librarians would like kids to learn and read, but kids just don't connect with because the story's not there. And I think that's what is the real difference with our story, our series, is that there's a real story there for kids to follow, and there are characters with whom they can identify, and there's a real narrative arc. So the kids who are reading volume 1 are going to want to know what happens in volume 2 and in volume 3. And I think that's a testament to Amy and Alex and the story that they're telling, that they've created, is that, it's compelling. There's a real story there.
And
Yes,
nobody dies.
absolutely.
None of the kids will die. Spoiler.
That's good. We don't need that kind of tragedy. Amy, last question before I let you all go. Thank you all for this great conversation. You asked the great questions that I had. Who needs to read this book, hear these stories? Who is this designed for?
Well, it's very tempting to design it because the more I realize teachers actually don't have this information. It's really designed for everybody, including our own community. We have a big problem, and a lot of us grew up in a total vacuum. Some of us believe in the BS, right? That because there's so little, and we've sort of been siloed too, and that the horrible model minority stuff, right? So first and foremost, I do feel like my parents need to read this because they have no idea of their own history. My kid has to read it because he's helping me write it. So, there's a bit of that, but I think it's really meant for everybody, all communities. And that's why we did, as you pointed out, design it this way. So everyone's represented here. And this is in the second volume and the third volume, we're really going to start seeing that because we're moving towards present day, and we're going to start seeing how we as Asian Americans benefited from the affirmative action movement, the civil rights movement, and all these things that kind of conveniently get left out sometimes in the narrative. So it's representing a history in a really real way, but also providing context for everybody involved, that we all did this together.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you all so much. I can't wait to share this with my community, with my kid, with my library. I'm going to be definitely donating some copies. And we look forward to volumes 2 and 3.
Great.
Thank you,
Thanks very
Ron.
much.
Thanks,
Ron.